There's so much news and so many changes that I had trouble naming this video, so I suppose when you're watching it you'll know what the title is, because it goes right to the end of this video. Also, I'll try and keep myself out of trouble when it comes to who controls the government. Any government for that matter, but in this case there's an example of who controls Australian government.
Delays for tax cuts, but here comes a rate cut and new easier lending rules for home buyers. And that means no more discounts from the $12 billion man. Talking property and Morrison's win with Harry Triguboff.
Congratulated. And he told me without my help he couldn't do it, which of course is an exaggeration.
An extraordinary day in the economy, with the Reserve Bank signalling it's poised to cut rates and the banking regulator loosening lending rules. 33 Reserve Bank board meetings have gone past with no change, and now all of that is about to end. The RBA Governor, Philip Lowe, speaking in Brisbane, delivered his strongest signal that he will be cutting rates at the June meeting, which is in 2 weeks. The promise of a cut comes as the banking regulator eases lending rules, which could light a fire under sagging property prices. Here's finance correspondent Philip Lasker.
Competition is fierce as the economy loses momentum, threatening jobs growth. Australia's central bank can no longer sit on the sidelines.
A lower cash rate would help support employment growth, and it would bring forward the time when inflation is consistent with the target. Given this assessment, at our meeting in 2 weeks' time, we will consider the case for lower interest rates.
I guess the reality is they look at the possibility of interest rate cuts every meeting. It's just whether or not they actually go ahead and do that.
We see that as pretty much a green light for a rate cut, and we've built that into our forecast now, a rate cut in June and then another one in August.
And borrowers are exuberant.
That's fabulous. If we can get any reduction in interest rates and save on the mortgage, it's a good thing.
Mortgage stress everywhere, so yep, absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Helps me out.
The RBA also wants to see lower unemployment.
The Australian economy can support an unemployment rate of below 5% without raising inflation concerns.
And the bank is conscious of the squeeze on households.
The household sector's facing many headwinds at the moment. We've got very high levels of household debt. We've got wages growth still weak. House prices have also been falling.
Stronger growth in income will help, but the more important factor here is some tax relief.
Delivering at least some of the tax relief won't be easy. A political battle is shaping up in Canberra because the government is insisting that the tax cuts for low and middle income earners be tied to relief for those on high incomes.
It is important that this is dealt with as a package, because we're talking about not just immediate tax relief, but we're also talking about long-term structural reform.
Falling property values are weighing on spending, and the banking regulator has moved to free up lending restrictions by reducing the safety buffer used to assess what a borrower can afford. A mortgage holder with the standard home loan of, say, 3.9% is currently being assessed by lenders as if they were servicing a minimum 7% rate. Regulators now say lenders will only need a 2.5% buffer, which means the same loan will be assessed at a lower rate of 6.4%.
This will bring a few more buyers back into the market because people that previously couldn't get a mortgage will now be able to.
It also gives banks more breathing space to pass on rate cuts. According to Core Logic, the combination of lower interest rates and the easier lending restrictions will bring forward the property price recovery by 6 months.
If we get both of these measures, we'll see the housing market bottom before the end of this year.
No doubt a welcome sight for the government and regulators worried about a property-induced recession.
The takeaway from this segment is that the government will likely want to do anything and everything in their power to keep this property ponzi going. If you ask me, it's totally insane how much time is spent talking about property. I mean, just the existence of my channel, where 95 to 99% of the content is about the property, is ridiculous. We shouldn't be talking about it. But why am I talking about it, and everyone is because the prices have gone astronomical and they shouldn't be there. It is one of the essential human needs you got shelter, you got clothing, and you got food. Imagine if the food, for example, or even the clothing, let's just imagine the food was speculated on as much as the property speculated on. You'd be going into the supermarket like a Bitcoin type thing, and you'd be paying for milk, you'd be paying $2, and you think, oh, hey, that's pretty good. And then you go the next day and it's like $5. Or as the property is gone, like every day the price of milk would go up by 10 or 20 cents. That wouldn't be sustainable. But why is that happening? Because somebody's buying and selling property and buying and selling milk and investing in it, which is not something you could imagine, but somehow it's done by property. But that gets us into our next segment as to who controls the government.
Well, billionaire apartment developer Harry Triguboff can't hide his delight at the prospect of an imminent interest rate cut and the government's planned help for first home buyers. He told me today he won't have to discount anymore. It's bad news for house hunters looking for a bargain. Mr Triguboff believes this intervention signals the end of price falls. But he would say that. He's got thousands of apartments for sale up and down the East Coast. I spoke with him at Meriton's offices. Harry Triguboff, the Reserve Bank Governor has today given the strongest possible hint that the board will cut rates in 2 weeks. Do we need a cut?
I think that will be very good. It will be a great help to the real estate market, which is very weak. And I think that it will give hope, or it will give the reason for people to buy and not to pull out, not to think. Like we have a sale of 5 apartments in Surface Paradise, and the people from China, from Hong Kong, didn't know whether to go ahead or not. But once they saw the results of the election and the movements of everyone, they're going ahead. So we already feel the difference.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the election has affected whether?
Of course, the way the Labour ran it, they wanted the people to lose money, actually. And nobody wants to lose money. And I think they say that they didn't explain their policies well. I think the Liberals didn't explain. I think the Labour Party explained their policies very well to have got the number of votes they got.
How much do you expect the cutting of interest rates and the government's plans to help first home buyers to lift prices by?
You know, I sell now probably at 10% discount. And besides that, I give them money at 3% and I help them with the stamp duty. So I think that first I should be able to get the full price, not less discount, not less this. So we're still a long way from prices to go up.
Do you think these moves will actually put a floor in the market, that it will restore confidence more than adjust prices?
Yeah, it will do all that, but it will still be a long way away from what it used to be.
In January, you said that the market had slowed so much you were only selling around 5 units a week. By April, it had stabilised to around 20 units a week.
Right.
How many are you selling now?
Well, it's only May, and the election was only the other day. So I would say it's only 1 week, but I would say we could sell now close to 30.
And if we see the RBA's cuts pass through by the banks, we see the government's first home buyers come through, then how many?
I'll probably give less discount. I don't want to sell more. I'll probably give less discount. But that's my peculiar situation.
Have you spoken to Scott Morrison since the election?
Just for 2 minutes. I congratulated him. And he told me without my help he couldn't do it, which of course is an exaggeration.
Last time I saw you, it was last year, and you're in the government or the parliamentary offices up in Number 1 Bligh Street.
Right.
Who are you seeing there, and what policies were you there to discuss? What did you think the economy needed at that time?
The economy needed that time and this time the same thing. In Sydney, our planning department is very difficult. It takes us many years.
Now, RBA Governor Philip Lowe normally has this smiley face, and if you look at the psychology, pretty much whenever he delivers speeches, he's got a pretty positive smiley face. But let's have a look what his face looks like now when he's announcing that he's going to be most likely cutting interest rates again. If you've watched the movie Godfather or the series like Sopranos, you know how these higher-ranking officials, they have an opinion to go one way, and then somehow they're persuaded by the mafia to go the other way. This is what it looks like. This is completely speculation. There's nothing I know behind the scenes, obviously. So this is just entertainment, speculation. You make up your own mind.
A lower cash rate would help support employment growth, and it would bring forward the time when inflation is consistent with the target. Given this assessment, at our meeting in 2 weeks' time, we will consider the case for lower interest rates.
I guess the reality...
Yes, so they will consider the case for the low interest rates. Who's making that case? Well, let's see who we might be, or who he might be taking the case from.
Have you spoken to Scott Morrison since the election?
Just for 2 minutes. I congratulated him. And he told me without my help he couldn't do it, which of course is an exaggeration.
The Reserve Bank Governor has today given the strongest possible hint that the board will cut rates in 2 weeks. Do we need a cut?
I think that will be very good. It will be a great help to the real estate market, which is very weak. And I think that it will give hope, or it will give the reason for people to buy and not to pull out, not to think.
Did you catch that? They want you to not pull out, and it'll give you the reason not to think and just buy. That's what they want you to do. So the government, in cahoots with them, want to make it better for the building industry. He said it would be very good for the real estate and the building industry, and will make people not to want to pull out, and will want people and make people not to think. Well, you would have to not think to buy some of these developments, in my opinion.
RBA boss Philip Lowe yesterday gave the strongest signal a rate cut is on the way for the first time in 3 years.
A decrease in the cash rate would likely be appropriate.
One of the drivers, falling house prices. But is this the bottom? In addition to a rate cut, 2 other key measures could set a floor on the price of our roofs. Last week, a $500 million leg up for first home buyers.
So these measures will actually alleviate that tumble and probably hopefully stabilise the economy.
And some first home buyers will be able to buy with just 5% deposit, with the government replacing the bank of mum and dad to bridge the gap to the 20% traditionally required.
So it must impact on the market because it helps more people get into the market.
And yesterday, good news for borrowers and developers. The banking regulator relaxing lending requirements. Rory Costello has greenfields developments in 3 states, like this one in outer Melbourne. Credit tightened sharply after the Royal Commission exposed lax lending standards. Mr Costello says the new measures could be worth as much as $100,000 to borrowers.
At the moment, we're actually facing quite a severe drop in confidence and lack of people to actually settle their blocks, because the banks are not just giving enough money to settle contracts they've already committed to.
Since 2014, APRA required banks to ensure borrowers could afford a buffer to pay their loan if interest rates hit 7%. But with rates below 4% and set to drop further, they're lowering the requirement. It will mean people can borrow more.
I think all the current changes are that trying to bring a little bit of confidence back in the market.
New figures show a continuing slide in construction, down almost 2% in the 3 months to March. Residential construction, even worse, down 2.5% for the same period and 3% for the year. Louis Christopher of SQM Research says Australian house prices haven't bottomed out, but they might not be far from it.
These are major developments and are certainly powerful enough to create a bottom in the housing markets for Sydney and Melbourne and other cities, and a recovery later this year.
The new government and the Reserve Bank aren't just worried about borrowers, it's also about jobs. They're counting on the new measures, not only bolstering prices, but boosting the all-important construction industry. And that's why Dr. Philip Lowe is urging state and federal governments to spend big on infrastructure. There's 3 times more money tied up in Australian real estate than there is in the share market. A decade of price rises has created winners and losers in the economy. After a period of falls and quiverings, today's developments suggest that institutions don't want those prices to go anywhere, but up.
I think it's a really fundamental part of Australia that we have this attachment to our houses and that people want to buy into this market, and I think that's a legitimate role for government to be encouraging that behaviour.
Apparently, it's the duty of the government to encourage the behaviour of just buying into the market. Doesn't matter, no matter where the market is, whether you're the first home buyer or the investor, just keep buying, because it's going to keep going up and up and up. And somehow that's going to be better for the borrowers, for us, the people. I somehow don't think so.
With a gloomy economic outlook, we'll soon find out if safe as houses is just a phrase.
The reason for people to buy and not to pull out, not to think.
Have you spoken to Scott Morrison since the election?
Just for 2 minutes. I congratulated him. And he told me without my help he couldn't do it.